variety of seasonal produce, and they use organic practices, and they sell all their food directly to the campus dining services. So again, it was really interesting. Now I'll show you something. So when we went there, it looked like the top photo, and it didn't really look like much of a farm, and there wasn't a lot going on, and it was bitterly cold, of course. But during growing season, it looks like the picture below. So it's interesting just to see how higher ed is incorporating sustainability practices. And I wanted to just share with you a little bit of my journey to the Midwest recently. So we are kicking off sustainability today, and I wanted to share with you, we have a number of other programs. So if you're in a period of exploration, we have cybersecurity, we've got gap year coming up, the creative economy, and then allied health therapist career panel. That includes occupational therapy, PT, audiology. So if you're in a period of exploration, please come to any and all of these programs, but all of you are very interested, I'm presuming, in sustainability. So that is our program today, and really excited to introduce our panelists. So we have a UCI staff member with us today, and then we have 3 alums. So we have Garrett Hurley, director of the UCI Sustainability Resource Center. We have Alyssa Naigan. She is a sustainability analyst, relatively new grad from Mirage with ActOne Group. We have Dr. Robert Garcia, who was a postdoctoral fellow at the Environmental Defense Fund, graduating in 2016 from UCI. And our last but not least alum is Tingyao Li, new grad, environmental science policy, social policy, public service. And he is a sustainability specialist with CR&R Incorporated. So we have a range of folks today that practice sustainability in their careers. So we are going to dive into that all-important first question. And I am going to have folks introduce them. Well, they don't need to introduce themselves, but folks are going to be talking about their current position or their former position, and basically what that job entails. And Garrett, do you mind if I start with you to kick off the first question?
Of course, I'm happy to. Yeah, hello, welcome everyone. I'm so happy to see so many faces. Thanks to DCP for inviting me. I'm very excited to talk to you all. I'm also very excited that 3 alums are on this panel to talk to you all about their experiences, and hopefully you gain a lot from them as well. Yes, my name is Garrett Hurley. I use he, him pronouns are my name. I am the director of the UCI Sustainability Resource Center here on campus for UCI. In general, our mission is to serve as a central location for campus and the community to get attached to resources, educational programming, and really any opportunity that students, staff, faculty, community members want to get involved with sustainability on our campus. I've been in this role only 7 months, so I'm new to UCI, but I'm already learning that you all are doing such great things in your educational journeys here. And then as the panelists will tell you, I'm sure they're doing great things after they graduate. So I can speak to a lot of the opportunities that are here and what we're doing through the SRC sustainability-wise, but also for the last 5 years before joining UCI, I was the sustainability coordinator at Indiana State University. So I was very happy Carol showed Butler University in Indianapolis, another Indiana school. So a lot to talk about from there. Carol, can you remind me what the question prompt was?
Basically, what does your position entail?
Yeah,
just in a nutshell.
Yeah, the position entails working with all of you students on providing opportunities, educational resources, trainings, all the like around sustainability. My position is really focused on educational sustainability and making sure that it's integrated across the curriculum, that you have programs and opportunities and things like this that Division of Career Pathways is so great to put on.
Great. Thank you so much, Garrett. Alyssa?
Yes, hello everyone. Per the introduction, my position is sustainability analyst for the ActOne group, which is a service providing company, private company, and they have recently introduced a sustainability department a couple years ago. So I was recruited onto there. As a sustainability analyst, I kind of have two roles in the company, and feel free to ask any questions later on today. But one of the roles is monitoring that data. So, how much carbon emissions our company is putting out, monitoring, the cost and how effective it would be to input solar, et cetera, for all of our utilities and facilities. On the other side of things, I am also in charge of putting out projects for those social and governance side of ESG, for that corporate social responsibility, kind of seeing how we can implement that within our private company. So that is what my position is.
Great. And we'll be digging a lot deeper, but thank you so much, Alyssa, for that overview. And Robert.
Hi, everyone. My name is Robert Garcia. I use he, him pronouns. And my role was the Kravis Postdoctoral Fellow in Social Sciences at the Environmental Defense Fund back in 2018 and 2019. So my responsibilities primarily included conducting research on how people think about environmental issues, climate change, and climate policy. So there's a combination of survey, experimental research, literature reviews, and more.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much, Robert. That and Tingyao.
Hey everyone, nice to meet you all. My name is Tingyao. I work for CR&R Incorporated. For those of you that are unfamiliar with CR&R, to put it simply, we are a trash company. So some of y'all might have waste management at home. Some of y'all might have Republic services at home. We are CR&R, a smaller company, but we're definitely really active in Orange County. So as Carol mentioned, I am a sustainability specialist with CR&R. So one of my main responsibilities is to work with a particular city that is contracted with us and to implement sustainability programs. So that means signing people up for organics services as well as recycling services, teaching them how to use their containers, how to compost, how to sort items from their trash correctly. So my role centers a lot around education and outreach, and also touches a little bit on policy because there's a statewide requirement for all companies as well as apartment complexes to have recycling. So we're kind of at the forefront of implementing this policy.
Thank you. Appreciate hearing about that. It's very interesting. Okay, so the next question is about skill development, and the students on the call, many are going to be pursuing careers in sustainability. So this is about skill development and what is one of the most important skills that you use currently in your position, and how did you start developing that skill when you were in school? Garrett, I'm going to take a little bit of a different avenue for this question with you. And I think it's more, how can students develop their skills by aligning them with the Sustainability Center and the resources and programs that you provide?
I'll let the other panelists speak because I think what you all will say will be relevant to what I say.
Okay, very good. So I'll go ahead, and why don't we start with Alyssa, and can you talk about one of the most important skills that you utilize, and then maybe how students can start developing that skill set while they're at UCI?
Yes, of course. When I was a student at UCI, I was very involved in the sustainability community. And I think that for all the folks watching today, I know that the passion is there towards environmentalism and sustainability. But I think one of the skills that I really had to develop going into my position was data analysis, which seems so far off from sustainability and what the idea is. But in my position, I've learned that everyone carries the importance of sustainability and these social and governance issues very strongly. But in order to show how important it is in a corporate setting, you really need those numbers and you really need that data to understand why implementing such projects or implementing such ideas are so important on the front-facing side. it's a very interesting conversation that we can have later on. But
Mhm.
I know from the corporate side of things, it's all, like money, what's going to make the most money. From a sustainability analyst point, it's more so how can we give back to the communities without always thinking about the bottom line. So I think data analysis is one of the bigger skills that I would recommend looking into while you're still a student.
Okay, and I'm going to dig a little deeper with that question. How can they become more data analytic through courses, through certificates? Do you have any recommendations there?
Yes, I took a data analysis class. I believe it's Management 107,
Okay.
if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
It's a management class, and my professor, who I had heavily, and I'm not too sure why, really exaggerated the idea of getting to know Tableau, which is a new data analysis platform. And I was like, what are you talking about? It's so new. Like, it came out a couple years ago. And right when I went into this position, one of the requirements was getting to know that specific data platform. I'm not too sure if it's just overall that platform is more popular or just in the sustainability world.
Mhm.
But that one, as well as Power BI, it's a Microsoft extension that is really good for monitoring data in real time. So those would be the two that I would recommend looking into, getting a certificate for, or taking like a class for it.
Okay, well, this is golden information spoken from an industry professional and a relatively recent grad. So I really appreciate that. Robert, could you delve into this as well in terms of skill sets that you
Absolutely.
utilize?
I was going to echo a lot of what Alyssa already said.
Mhm.
At least for me personally, my role required a lot of research design skills, data analysis and presentation skills as well, like she said. So yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Power BI, the statistical language, and Python, those two are also just in high demand no matter where you go, quite frankly. Tech is at the core of our economy, and that those skills are highly sought after no matter who you're working for. In addition to that, I would say project management and stakeholder engagement skills were a big one for me. Everyone wants to know that you can work as part of a team and that you can manage a project. And that was certainly the case for me. And those are actually skills that I developed in graduate school. I had to run, I actually found and run 2 research laboratories to run my psychology experiments. So keeping track of the responsibilities of each team member and the project milestones was super important, and that carried over quite cleanly to my my research at the Environmental Defense Fund. Additionally, I had to conduct literature reviews, and that's a standard practice in academic research. So getting practice with that on your projects as a student is something that you will hopefully carry with you after you graduate.
Okay, excellent tips here. I also have a tip. We have an office called the UCI Division of Continuing Education. Check out DCE, see if they have any certificates pertaining to the programs that have been mentioned today, pertaining to sustainability, project management, and so forth. Those certificate programs can help carry you forward. Okay, Tingyao.
Yeah, I'm gonna definitely echo Alyssa and Robert's comments and kind of just combine them into one. I know a couple of topics that you all mentioned were data analysis as well as project management, and I would say those two are the ones that are most relevant, at least to my position. And the reason I say that is because, as I mentioned before, the state is requiring us to implement these programs, and they want it to be done before a certain time. So that requires a lot of breaking it down into smaller pieces and trying to think about, even though the goal might seem really large and the end result might seem really big, but how can we break that down into smaller, doable pieces? So I think that's a really important skill. The second one is data analysis, as Alyssa mentioned. So in my position, we work with the city directly. So every month we do monthly reports to the city. And we show them, how much tonnages are we diverting from the landfill? How much recyclables are we being able to generate and collect? So being able to track those numbers, being able to sort those numbers, and not even in like really advanced program. We just use Excel. So kind of just being familiar with equations and, being able to, crunch these numbers in a way is really important. And I think for ENSP majors at UCI, they're required to take ESS 116, I believe, which is a computer analysis class, I believe. So that one is really important. And then in terms of outside of the course, I participated in a internship program. I think it's called the Campus as a Living Lab, where I was able to participate directly with UCI facilities management, which is they handle the trash and everything that goes into the buildings as well. So that's directly connected to my work now. So if you all are looking for opportunities to be more involved on campus in terms of sustainability, I would definitely recommend Campus as a Living Lab as like the first option and go to.
Some really good gems here. And I think, Tingyao, that the information you provided is a really nice dovetail for Garrett to talk about ways that students can be involved through your center.
Yeah. Well, I was taking a couple of notes too on what you all were saying. And I really appreciate it for everyone that's in here as well, because oftentimes what we forget about are what the hard skills are that jobs often are asking of you all as professionals. And I do want to say, depending on the job, right, it could be different hard skills that you need. So if you're also sitting here wondering like, oh, I don't want to go into a hardcore data, right? Most jobs still will have some piece of data to it, right? It'll just be different. So ask questions if you have any about that. But also the soft skills are what I hit on a lot for people. And part of that is the stakeholder engagement piece that Dr. Garcia is talking about too, with the collaboration and partnerships and knowing where your network stands with what you're doing. And to dovetail into the opportunities that are available to all of you, really the hard skills and the soft skills are what you need to focus on in searching for opportunities. And so at UCI, we have a lot of opportunities for students, but you have to look for it a little bit, depending on what you want to do. So the first is research, right? So if you're looking for some of these data analysis skills that are outside of the classroom and outside of the projects that you do within that, research is the next step. The next big thing that you could do that gets you some of that experience in a very focused way, right? And you can take that and transfer it to another opportunity, right? Even if it's not the same thing you did in that research lab, you can still transfer those skills to something else. The other thing are internships and fellowships that Tingyao is talking about. There are a lot on this campus. You do have to look, but again, even if it's not, out in front of your face, sustainability, you can still describe how those skills are transferable to what you're doing and what you want to do with sustainability. So Campus as a Living Lab is a great program and a great example run through the SRC to provide those real life experiences and to get those hard skills and soft skills, right? And even if you don't see how it transfers over to what you want to do, right? If you talk about how you're collaborating, how you're working with multiple folks to work on a project, right? And the timeline of the project, you can transfer those skills over. So those are really the two big things outside of the class that I would say, but definitely look for classes that are relevant as well for those specific pieces too, for electives or even within your major and minors.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for capping that off. So the next question is specific, and we have touched upon this already, specific to internships and volunteerism. And whoever would like to take this question, what can students do to be ready for a career in sustainability as it pertains to volunteerism and as it pertains to internships? And I know we talked about Campus as a Living Lab as an experiential education, but what are some other internships, volunteer experiences that students can engage with regard to sustainability?
Yeah, I can start with this one. Students right now, get involved with things on campus, but to answer your specific question around volunteerism, there are a lot of great opportunities within the community of Irvine, within the community of Orange County, within your home communities to get involved with nonprofit organizations or even local municipalities that are doing great things around sustainability. And these also translate into where you can gain some of those hard skills and soft skills, right? So for example, we have a great organization here in Orange County called OC Coastkeeper, and they do a lot of education around Orange County for our coastal ecosystems and what we can do. They also have great volunteer events, and they also host fellows for social ecology. So that's one example of how you can get involved in multiple outlets there and get your feet wet, you know, pun intended for OC Coastkeeper, in that kind of experience and see what it's all about.
Perfect. Would anyone else like to address this question about volunteerism?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So I'd say the first step is identify what skill you want to use to contribute to sustainability. So, you know, in my case, it was research, but, you know, I can look on LinkedIn, look on Indeed.com and Glassdoor for roles like research analyst that correspond to that skill. Because ultimately, I mean, presuming that you're looking for a career in this field, you kind of want to already have kind of a roadmap of what skills are valued in this space. That I can already be training for, even in my volunteer pro bono type work. On top of that, I was going to say, prior to landing my role at the Environmental Defense Fund, I actually did volunteer work with 2 different sustainability nonprofits. So, and so one of them was called Seed OC. That was basically a pro bono consulting firm that recruits people who are in or straight out of college to do partnerships with community organizations that want to make their operations more sustainable. So I'm going to actually drop that link in the chat if that's okay.
Perfect. Absolutely.
So
Is that Robert,
in.
is that Christian Johnson affiliated with that?
It absolutely is. Yes.
Okay. I do know Christian. So that's fantastic. That's a wonderful
Yes.
organization.
Yes, it is. And another one that I worked with was called the Root Solutions. So I'll just drop that in there as well.
Beautiful.
That one is basically looking to use social science and other kinds of sciences to just help nudge things in the right direction. But again, it's very volunteer friendly, shall we say. And those things gave me valuable experience prior to EDF. Yeah, so that's what I would say. So yeah, employers are going to look for hands-on projects that you've done. And even the pro bono ones count as long as you can just highlight the skills that you applied while working on them. So just kind of go into it with that in mind.
So everyone on the call, you are getting some really concrete advice today, which is wonderful, as well as the more theoretical foundational advice, but you're getting a lot of really good concrete feedback from the panelists. Alyssa, Tingyao, did you have any questions? Did you have anything to contribute in terms of volunteerism, internships?
Yeah, I was gonna add on, I think a couple more examples. So I know sustainability is super broad, so there's something for everybody. And some of my examples that I was gonna provide, I know Garrett touched upon the educational aspect. One great opportunity that UCI has is Earth Reps, and that focuses on education. So as an Earth Rep, you kind of teach first-year students, go into residential halls, stuff like that. Teach them how to recycle, how to compost, how to save water, just stuff like that. And then TGIF, the Green Initiative Fund, here on campus is something you can apply for as well if you're more interested in budget management, if you're more interested in kind of like the business aspect of sustainability. And the last one that I was going to point out was also OC Coastkeeper that Garrett mentioned. I interned with them for a little bit. So they have great programs on pertaining to education. So taking students on field trips, and these students are usually from Title I schools. So they provide them with school buses and, lab materials and expose them to different opportunities and field trips and whatnot. They also have a legal team. So if you're more interested in the legal aspect, the policy aspect, as Robert is, of sustainability, they have something for that as well. So just I would definitely say OC Coastkeeper is a great resource, and it's just in Costa Mesa. It's on like Bear Street or something like that. It's super close.
I think we're really covering all the different tracks within sustainability, which is wonderful. I also wanted to let the folks know on the call that we will be having some breakout sessions. So hang in with us if you can until about 5 o'clock or prior to that, depending on how many questions we tackle, because you'll be able to meet individually in breakout rooms with our panelists. So is there anything else, Alyssa, did you want to add to that? I know you've mentioned internships prior.
Sure, yeah, I'll highlight some just so that it's out there, and if you have any questions we can chat about it later. Not too sure if this program is still at UCI under the Sustainability Resource Center, but I attended the Summer Institute for Sustainable Leadership back when I was a freshman, so a few years ago. And that is a really good program if you're interested in action-oriented projects, more community-based, kind of getting out there and planning those grassroots kind of projects. So that I would recommend looking into that program. Awesome, Garrett, I just saw your chat. I would highly recommend it. That was one of the first introductions to sustainability in higher education for me, and it really, really stuck with me. So highly recommend that if that's the route you want to take. Other than that, that's my only UCI experience, but I do want to highlight that every internship that I did get, like summer internships, winter internships, were found through Handshake when I was a UCI student, one of which was a startup, a sustainability-based startup. Think of it as like Yelp, but instead of rating the food, it rates how sustainable those businesses are. That was one of my internships back when I was a junior, I think, I don't know. But yes, highly recommend looking on Handshake. There's a lot of local, if you're local to OC, a lot of local companies or startups looking for interns on there as well. So I'd like to have that.
Outstanding. Thank you so much. And thank you for mentioning Handshake. All roads to DCP, Division of Career Pathways, go through Handshake, and you can filter it, go in and put environmental, put in sustainability, put in keywords, and you can find internships, full-time, part-time jobs, ... So thank you, Alyssa, for mentioning Handshake. So we're going to go from the specific to the more global in this question. So what are some trends? I mean, sustainability is everywhere. We're hearing it everywhere, but I'm really interested because we have subject matter experts here. What are some trends or outlooks that you want to share pertaining to sustainability in general and perhaps your sustainability track in specific? Whoever would like to tackle this one, kind of what's the future look like in sustainability? I might have to call on someone, so I'm going to call on Robert.
That's fine.
Done
I
a
was
lot of
about to
research.
unmute myself anyhow. Yeah, I mean, we already kind of touched on this, but again, I think data visualization is a big one. As Alyssa mentioned, Tableau, that is huge. That's something that I've actually been trying to get experience on myself because of how high the demand is for it. And it's interesting how we live in a time of very quickly evolving technology. I was trained in SPS for statistics, competitive on the but I as well. Yeah, so Tableau, coding for stats in Python and R. If you're doing anything geographical, GIS or ArcGIS, that's a software that is also in high demand for geospatial data. And yeah, basically, I mean, this is kind of all of a roundabout way of saying, the skills that the tech industry values are going to be valued by the sustainability field as well, right? AI, that's a hot thing right now, right? And you can expect that AI solutions are going to be used or deployed while tackling sustainability problems. So couldn't hurt to study that in machine learning, for example.
Excellent. Okay. Tingyao, did you want to address this question?
Yeah, I think Robert touched a lot in terms of the outlook of the sustainability industry in general. I can mainly speak on the waste hauling industry. So as I mentioned before, the California requirement that I'm referring to is Senate Bill 1383, and it went into effect early 2022. As I mentioned, it requires all businesses to have both recycling as well as organics services. So that's yard waste and food waste. So all businesses as well as apartment complexes. So that's kind of what we're still working on implementing. So very exciting stuff because this will definitely reduce the amount of methane output that we have into our atmosphere and also address key components of global warming. So that's kind of what we're working on and we're working towards, as I mentioned before, of course, I'm just managing one city, but cities all across the state are working on this project between the waste hauler as well as the city itself.
Wonderful. Alyssa, did you want to share some trends that you perceive?
Yes. Not too sure if the word trend applies to my point directly, but I think that in a corporate setting, you're seeing a lot more accountability for corporations and how they report and how honest they are in their reports and what they are reporting, what they're not. So in my position specifically, obviously my company has to report to, like the United Nations or to the Global Reporting Initiative. And through these reports, we have to understand that, like the data has to be accurate, has to be honest, has to keep us accountable. And just understanding those mechanisms within a company, if you do go the route that I did, is becoming more and more granular and is becoming a lot more prevalent, regardless of if it's a corporation or if it's, a university or a nonprofit, that these topics are showing up in more and more industries, and the importance of being honest about it and making changes according to these reports is becoming a lot more prevalent.
Excellent. Okay, Garrett, do you have anything to add? I know we covered a lot of ground here on trends.
Yeah. Okay, I'll try not to get too political with my answer, but the future does depend on, our politics here in the US and then in a global sense. So right now we're in a very, very hot market for sustainability and where it's coming. It's coming from everywhere. And that's primarily because of where our policymakers are leaning in terms of sustainability and climate change specifically. With the Inflation Reduction Act and a whole bunch of other stuff that has happened recently, there's a lot more funding coming in places that didn't used to have it, and that was more minuscule in terms of the market. So you look at things like our alternative energy, and I know I'm talking to a lot of folks in California too, where it's been more prevalent in the last 10 years, but in the US, it hasn't been. So the market is expanding greatly in terms of alternative energy, right? From both wind, water, sun, everything. Also, we're looking at different ways for urban planning, building design, everything in that realm, and how climate change is impacting what we're doing city-wise, which then also impacts what we're doing in the transportation sector, right? Which then also impacts our fuel and other energy sources, right? So we're seeing an increase in a lot of different sectors on things that are specifically focusing on how climate change impacts that field, right? And more funding is going into it. So it's a hot market right now. But I will say it depends on where we go in the future in terms of our political realm in the future.
Thank you for that comprehensive overview. I'm learning so much. I consider myself to be somewhat educated on sustainability, but now I realize that I have a long ways to go. So thank you so much for that overview. My next question is sort of job specific, and for the panelists, what you like most about your job. Why don't we throw in what you like least? That wasn't on the list of questions I sent you, but sort of challenges, rewards. And then I'm also just kind of interested in knowing what your culture is like. What is your work culture like? So if I could, I'd like to start with Tingyao.
Yeah, I love this question. I think people don't usually think about their trash and where it goes, and once it's out the door, it's gone. But in terms of the waste hauling industry and in terms of my job specifically, I'll start off with the item that I like the least. And it's in my role, I kind of usually have to take on other responsibilities as well. Because in the process of implementing these programs and doing outreach and letting people know that, oh, here's what you can do with your recycling container, I usually receive a lot of calls about missed service. So it's something that's pretty prevalent, not just in our company, but a lot of other companies as well. So I usually get a lot of complaints, and addressing customer service issues is definitely something that is something I'm not super fond about. But in terms of my favorite aspect of the job is every single month I get to see our compliance numbers go up. So every single month, the number of accounts that are not compliant with these requirements is going down. So more and more people are signing up for recycling as well as composting services, which also means that there's less trash being ended up in our landfills. So that's something that I really look forward to. I really enjoy. And then Carol, what else did you mention?
I was just interested in, what is your company culture like? Do you work hybrid? Do you work non-hybrid? And is it, kind of a casual environment, or how would you just describe your culture?
Yeah, so in terms of our sustainability department, not surprisingly, there are a lot of young people. So there's a lot of college grads, recent grads, mainly because, as Garrett mentioned, it's such a hot topic, and it's also just like a keyword. It's something that a lot of people are passionate about, especially young people. In terms of other aspects, we are not as flexible in terms of being remote. Mainly because the waste hauling industry is a little bit more old school, just because it's been around for so long. So it's still not as receptive to, these new trends as other industries maybe.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I relate to your answer about customer service. I was a customer service rep, so I completely understand and I think this generation keeps my generation honest in terms of sustainability. So I appreciate your answers to that question. Alyssa, did you want to address that question?
Yes. I'll answer what my favorite part of my current job is. And at the beginning, I said there's kind of two different tasks for me. It's the data analysis and the project-based side of things. And I would say the project-based side of things is one of my favorite parts, just because my company it's a staffing service company. So we don't produce products. There's no product we can potentially make more sustainable with the packaging, etc. So when it comes to services, it's very, we can implement a lot of different projects in it. For example, one of my biggest projects last year was implementing a volunteer time off policy, where we would pay for our staff to volunteer in their communities for a few hours, just like paid time off, but just ensuring that if they wanted to, we would support them in that way. So that was kind of a cool project. It kind of touches on social and governance responsibility on the corporate side of things, and it kind of gives us a boost that we are more than looking for the bottom line. On the other side of that question, one of my least favorite things is, I think that when the topic of environmentalism or sustainability is brought up in corporate settings, it's usually at the bottom of the agenda, which is very unfortunate, just because, at the end of the day, people have to make money. At the end of the day, we want to see profit. And it's kind of discouraging being at the bottom of that agenda, or trying to convince folks to allocate some money towards this environmental project that I believe so strongly about. But I understand that these topics are very new in the corporate setting, and I understand that, you know, the corporate structure was not meant to support such projects like this so quickly with the turnaround in the past decade. So I'd say that's one of my least favorite things. I'm still optimistic. Obviously, there's still strides in multiple different industries to get these in place, but that would be my answer for that part of the question.
Well, thank you for sharing those challenges. I appreciate that. And Robert, did you want to talk about the Environmental Defense Fund and what you liked working, what you liked about working there? Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, not surprisingly, my favorite part of the job was just researching for a cause I care about. You know, it's nice to see everyone kind of like-minded and believes in that mission. As far as the culture of the organization goes, so currently with COVID, the whole organization, as far as I recall, based on the colleagues I've spoken to, is still fully remote. I don't know if they're going to return to a hybrid schedule at some point, but that's my understanding. But prior to that, I would say, and I'm going to assume that there's a bit of carryover here. So it's an international nonprofit with about 1,000 employees. So it's very distributed and pretty siloed. So, you know, one of the challenges is that it's easy to get isolated and perhaps lonely at times if you don't proactively start conversations with people in different departments. And I guess that goes for any large organization, right? It's just like, unless there's a really effective mixer or something like that, you're going to have to kind of take it upon yourself to really get to know people. And you were asking Carol about the biggest challenges of the job, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, what you liked most and what was challenging, and then
I mean, I like working with people on the cutting edge of this stuff. You know, I was doing research on, again, like basically environmental and climate change psychology, right? So it's a really niche topic, and it was super cool to work with folks who are publishing, you know, just the cutting edge research. So that I was working with professors at Cornell, for example, you know, so that was a big honor. And as far as challenges go, I mean, there were times when, again, a lot of it just boils down to politics. There were times when I wasn't given access to all the stakeholders because of what a large organization it was. So sometimes there were bottlenecks where my manager had to kind of play telephone, saying something from a higher up that I couldn't speak to directly, that sort of thing. So sometimes limited input. And another thing was, you know, maybe more that surprised me more, but it's also important to realize. I would say political red tape for certain issues. You know, I'm really passionate about the carbon footprint and water footprint of food. You know, and so I was interested in within the organization starting a meat reduction campaign to try to you know, reduce the organization's own carbon footprint in addition to that of its clients. But as you can imagine, you know, there's a longstanding culture of, you know, we want to eat what we want to eat. And not to mention, some of EDF's clients are actually cattle ranchers. So, you know, you can imagine there's like political risks of saying, oh, you know, EDF is calling all of their partners to do this because, you know, it's, you don't want to alienate the folks you're trying to help, right? So a lot of these kind of complicated issues were tough to navigate.
Okay, perfect. So you said something, Robert, I did want to follow up with, and that is, you said sustainability psychology research that you were doing. Can you just speak briefly about what that is and what does that mean?
Sure, yes. So for example, I did research about what factors predict people's support for climate policy. So, you know, in addition to, you know, maybe what political party you're in, you know, there's also various demographic variables of interest, and there's also sort of, you know, I call psychological variables in terms of how your beliefs are structured, what policies you believe work, what policies you believe will hold people accountable, who you blame for climate change. All these different things go into your mental model and are essentially inputs to a regression equation that will help predict what your support for climate policy. So that's one example. Another one is like doing research about how people conceive of environmental issues. In other words, certain social groups might have a relatively narrow definition of what an environmental issue is, while other groups might be much looser with the term, but maybe the looseness actually comes from lived experience. So there's kind of this, social justice demographics sort of angle to the word environmentalism and, what it means to different communities. So I did research kind of about that, how we define it as a function of, race, socioeconomic status, and all kinds of things like that.
It's very layered, and I really appreciate you sharing about that. So Garrett, did you want to talk about maybe the culture of the center, or however you'd like to answer that question about what you like about what you do? And yeah.
I laughed because Carol's trying to get me in trouble, I think.
Am I?
Culture. We love talking about it, but I'll start with what I like about my role and similar roles in other higher education institutions is that really it's the best part and the most responsibility is working to educate the future and the current, right? So we have a lot of students flowing in from all ages to UCI and higher education in general across the United States and globally. And so it's a big responsibility to create opportunities for students to grow their passion and their skill set to be able to take this back to their home communities or to new communities, to their first job, to their last job, and make an impact for these big issues, right? So that's one of my favorite parts, is seeing that fully, right, from start to finish here at UCI, and see great alum like all three of yourselves on this panel too doing that work. The other part is making partnerships across campus, but also within the community, because again, it takes so many people doing this work and caring about it and working together that's my favorite part of seeing it come to fruition through a lot of what we're doing. My least favorite, and I echo a lot of what other people have been saying, both on the culture part and their role, and what Tingyao said of taking on so much. A lot of times we get asked as sustainability in our title or, as a passion to do more of that work when we only have a certain capacity to do like basic functions without other people also being on board. And that is even more so as we go through rough periods of time, cyclically. And then culture, I'll speak about this one broadly in terms of what I've seen sustainability wise that a lot of the others have said too, is that oftentimes, if you look at organizational change, organizational management, change is very, very difficult no matter what it is. And sustainability is a mindset change, right? From the way we've done things for the last 100 years to a completely new way, right? That is collaborative, that is addressing root issues, that is trying to make this big difference. And so that's a shock to everyone. So what, Alyssa said, what Dr. Garcia said with trying to make that change from sometimes the bottom up, sometimes the middle up, right? To the folks that actually need to also be on board to make that difference is hard. So it takes, again, my favorite part of the partnerships and working with everyone else to create that network and make that change. But it's draining, and I'm sure that the other panelists can say that too. And then I'll also just add one last point to it, is that, sustainability is, I'll use the word infiltrating, but the concept, right, is infiltrating these sectors, business, energy, transportation, all of these sectors that have historically been, white, male dominated, and still are. And sustainability as a field also resembles that too. The beginning, right, was white and male. And so it's very difficult for anyone who is on the other side of those identities to also get on board and make those partnerships without feeling, some sense, right? So as a white male in the sustainability industry in higher education, I also take that responsibility on to make sure that we're also addressing what Dr. Garcia is saying with those root issues, those social justice issues that are impacting that because that's a real thing within the career field too, that can impact your ability to make change for sustainability, your ability to, negotiate up, to talk to the superiors, to make those networks, to, bridge those partnerships. So just in general, I would say that that's kind of the culture of sustainability I've seen, right? Not just from my experience, but from the panelists here, from other students that have graduated. But I'll end that on a positive note to say, like, then you work with so many great people that become part of your network, and you're making those bridges and you're trying to make that change together. And that's really the beautiful part of it. So the more and more people we can get on board, the better it'll be.
Well, I really appreciate you bringing up the diversity and equity, inclusion, belonging piece as it pertains to sustainability. That's something that we take very seriously at the Division of Career Pathways, and a lens that we always use when we talk about careers and career tracks. So Garrett, thank you for mentioning that. And your response is really a great dovetail into my next and final question until we commence to do breakout rooms. And I hope folks will stay with us because you have an opportunity to connect directly with our panelists. My question that Garrett opened up so beautifully is, what other professions do you interact with in your current role outside of sustainability? I'm just curious to hear that intersection that happens in your particular field. So Tingyao, I'm hoping we could start with you for that question.
Yeah, so for my position, we work directly with the city. So every city pretty much has a public works department, which is also kind of the ones that handle facilities in the city. So we work directly with our city officials to implement this program. And we also work with their code enforcement team if there are any sort of if there's any sort of like what's the word, I would say resistance, or maybe just some sort of people not wanting to be on board. So we interact with the public sector a lot, and we report to them very frequently, and I would say that's one of our main stakeholders in implementing these sustainability programs and services.
Wonderful. Alyssa?
Yes. So for my company, the sustainability department is housed under the business operations umbrella. So I report directly to business operations, but other than that, I do reach out to the facilities department quite often for that data for those projects. If I ever have to present a new idea or any update on any initiative, reach out to marketing to get that nice and pretty and make sure that it's set out for our clients and candidates. Always have to cross-check with legal or HR when we want to start a project, or if we want to implement something, whether we're even able to in the way that we want it to look. And then just a continuous conversation with the project management team, making sure that everyone aligns when we're implementing such ideas in a business, just because I know there's always different lines getting crossed over and people get confused on why such things need to happen for a sustainability project. But really, you're really integrated with all the departments if you were to go the corporate route.
Perfect. Sounds like you interact with a lot of different folks. And Dr. Garcia, you touched upon this a bit, but when you were at the Environmental Defense Fund, how did you, what types of professionals did you interact with there?
Primarily it was other academic partners, but because of the community work I was doing, we did projects where we did research on, for example, students or community members, how they thought about environmental issues. And so we had to kind of create a, like, I guess you would say, a cross-functional and multidisciplinary team. And so, yeah, we had policy people, academics, community leaders and champions, and nonprofit leaders as well. Those are the main ones I would say. But maybe to give another more general framing of this question, if you have a PhD in research, you could probably expect to work with fellow academics, but also data scientists and researchers who might be in like a tech space, for example. Those are the main directions that I've seen people go with in a non-academic PhD.
Okay, I would be remiss if I didn't mention we do have the UCDC program. So for folks that are interested in environmental opportunities that are governmental, if you want to do a position in summer position in Washington, DC, check out our UCDC program. My good friend Michelle Mallon is the director of that program. So they do info sessions pretty much every quarter. So check that out. It's another tip for you. And we are nearing the 5 o'clock hour. I'm glad we still have folks online because we're going to be doing breakout rooms. My wonderful colleague, Katie Osterkamp, is